It's the Jim and Terry Show without my good friend Jim for a week while he's off doing good deeds for other people. Community service, that's my friend Jim. Do take care, Jim. I hope all things go well as you drive people to appointments at medical facilities. In the meantime, we're going to try an experiment on the Jim and Terry Show, looking at audio, not video, audio snippets and reacting to them. Here we go.
That obligates practitioners to warn the public or individuals who may be in danger in the case of an explicit threat of harm. During President Trump's first term in office, Dr. Lee saw the danger he posed and raised the alarm as a psychiatrist. She paid dearly for that and lost her job teaching at Yale. We dive into why that happened, into how she has been vindicated, and into the grave danger Donald Trump still poses to America. Before we start, I want to share this clip of Donald Trump demanding cognitive tests for candidates during a recent rally in Nevada. My conversation with Dr. Bandy Lee is right after.
And I think anybody running for president should take an aptitude or a cognitive test. I do. I think it. You want to have people that can pass things. And I took one in office. Remember, they were saying, first they said, this guy is brilliant. He wants to take over the world. That didn't work. Then they went to about 4 different scenarios. Then they said, he wants total control of the United States. He's never going to give up control. He's totally brilliant. Then they went to a different one. That didn't work too much. That didn't scare people. Then they said, he's dumb as a rock. He's dumb as a rock. I said, oh, that one I don't like. So I said to Doc Ronnie, do you know Doc Ronnie? And I said to him, you know, Ronnie, I'd like to take a cognitive test. I never heard of it before, but whatever it is. I like tests. I've always liked tests. Tests are very interesting. And, you know, I had an uncle. He's the longest serving professor, Dr. John Trump, in the history of MIT. Same genes. We have genes. We're smart people. We're smart people, you know? We're like Mr. Lieutenant Governor, we're like racehorses, too. You know, the fast ones produce the fast ones, and the slow ones doesn't work out so well, right? But we're no different in that sense.
My guest today is Dr. Bandy Lee, a forensic psychiatrist and an expert on violence. In 2017, she edited The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, in which she and 37 other mental health professionals deemed Trump's mental state to be a clear and present danger to the country. Since then, she has published a full psychological profile of the former president called Profile of a Nation. Dr. Lee, welcome to the show.
Well, there you go. I'll post the link to that in the notes below. So just check it out for yourself. Lots of great interviews on the Midas Touch. One I'm most interested in is the notion that this was way back early on in Trump's term of office. So this is I'm thinking it's 2016, 2017, but I do not have that information at my fingertips. But sounding the alarm, she was not alone, but she did pay the price, apparently. Her career was thrown into jeopardy. I have not followed it up to see where she is now, but being dropped from Harvard certainly was the pressure exerted by the administration of Donald J. Trump. Didn't like what he was hearing, which was the alarm. When you're harmed to yourself and or others, that is a mental health criteria under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Health, clinically diagnosed with what? Yeah, and here the irony of it all is that Trump is in Nevada this past week, arguing that there should be a cognitive test. Maybe there should be a moral test as well. What are your values? Let's see what you would do in XYZ situation. What principles guide your decision making? And if it's all about self, and if you cannot see beyond yourself, you are, in the office of the president, a clear and present danger to the country. The alarm bell should be sounding. It's a red alarm, 4-alarm fire. It's time to get out the hoses and get all the pumpers out and make sure everybody knows the conditions under which this coming election, November 2024, is being waged. It is not a fight between two candidates about policies, although policies will be the outcome or lack thereof. Remember, Trump was one of the most incompetent administrations in American history, with very little being produced by 4 years. And I'm thinking specifically of two things: the wall that Mexico never paid for and never got finished, and number two, the infrastructure week that Trump promised year after year, month after month, week after week. It's next week. Yeah, we're working really hard on it. And the third thing that I might squeeze in there is the thumbs down by John McCain when Trump promised immediately he's going to take away Obamacare. And John McCain gave the famous thumbs down. So not much to show. Some of it good, not to show. Some of it bad, not to show. But above all, it is about a leader who cannot put country first, who cannot put anything, anyone but himself at the center of anything. And I'm thinking of the way he pushed his way into I'm going to say it was a NATO meeting, but it may have been an EU meeting where he shoved one of the country's leaders out of the way and put himself first and chest puffed and straightened his jacket and straightened his tie and stared left and stared right. Do you remember that? There's something not right with that man.
And I think these are your words, some of the most violent individuals our society has produced. When did you first realize that Donald Trump was not just a showman with political ambitions, but someone who could provoke thousands of his followers to commit acts of violence and who had no reservations about making America as a whole a more violent country?
Yes, it may be astonishing for most people because I myself considered Donald Trump simply a shady businessman and an odious personality while I was growing up in New York City. But during his campaign, of course, there were a couple decades of experience with violent offenders who are my patient population that I came to recognize much more. And it simply took a few seconds of watching him on television. I think he was at one of his rallies saying something like, he will pay all the legal fees if you knock the hell out of somebody. And the way he interacted with his followers was the key to my recognizing his personality disposition, which was very much familiar to me from working with street gangs, prison blocks, and, as I said, people with violent personalities.
Well, that's the part that kind of gets me, is the notion that Trump is a mob boss. You've heard that throughout this election cycle. You've heard it while he was in office. You heard it while he was reluctant to leave office, that he's a mob boss. He controls things. He controls people. How do you explain that he still controls the Republican Party these many years later after exiting office? Why is it that senators and congressmen willingly kiss the royal ring of Trump and abandon all semblance of working for the people, government for the people, by the people? Why do they stop? In the most recent cases, of course, I think it's Senator Langford who worked out this bipartisan border deal and had that thrown under the bus because Trump picked up the phone and said that it was not in his favor to get this issue resolved. The mob boss, criminal, violent. That's the message from the psychiatrist being interviewed. Well, let's get back in here a little bit more about the diagnosis. You cannot diagnose over the internet, or you cannot diagnose someone who's not in your care, but you can when it comes time to assess danger. So get a load of this.
But is it psychopathy? Is it narcissistic personality? If you had to summarize it for the rest of our conversation, what is the diagnosis?
Yes. First of all, I'll say that mental illness does not give rise to dangerousness necessarily. In fact, those who are mentally ill are more often victims of violence rather than perpetrators. So violence has very little to do with mental illness. But there are a couple diagnoses that you've mentioned that are violence prone, which include psychopathy, which is one of my specialties, and narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and there are a number of diagnoses that could predispose to violence either against others or against oneself. But dangerousness is a separate assessment from a diagnosis. Diagnosis is for individual treatment, which you do in a private office. You wouldn't divulge a person's diagnosis unless you get permission from them because they're your private patient. Dangerousness, on the other hand, is an assessment that is made for the public. It's not for the individual, and there's really no reason to do a personal interview because dangerous individuals actually often lie and mislead and are very manipulative.
Where do you go with that information? This is from a clinical psychologist who's been sounding the alarm for, is it now 7-8 years? It's time to put this back on the front burner and let's get it out there that this is not an election about two people and policies, one leaning to the left, one leaning to the right. This is not about finding common ground or bipartisan anything. This is not about rational people. It is about mental health in a public office and a public servant. And the alarm bell should be ringing, and it's a 4-alarm fire. Let's get real with what November 2024 looks like from an American point of view. This is not even from a Canadian point of view, which is what will it be like if Trudeau is still in office in 2025 and Trump is the president. We barely hung on with our fingernails on, or as my mother-in-law likes to say, our teeth on the chalkboard, if you can imagine that, when Trump was in office and Trudeau was having to deal and negotiate with him then. There's no way this is going to work out well in a 2024 Trump victory. In fact, it'll be my surprise if he ever gets on the ballot because I'm trusting systems and policies, procedures, and constitutions to rein it all in before that happens. How do you like having an interaction with something audio? It's not quite a video, but is it change is good? Change is a rest? Change is something? Right into the Jim and Terry Show. Let us know what you're thinking. Bye-bye for now.